Author's House.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Richardson, and I'm gathered here today with Beatrice Fairbanks Cayzer. Today is October 1st, 2021, and today we're talking about her book, Kidnapped in Jerusalem. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Beatrice?
Well, the most important thing is my father was a United States ambassador at large, and that whatever country he went to, he had the title at that time. But he was specifically, before that, ambassador to Ethiopia, and there's a great deal of that in one of my books, which is very popular right now, Love Stories in Africa. That's doing very well. But the book that I want to talk about, if we could, is Kidnapped in Jerusalem, and a great deal of that I got because my father had been in the diplomatic service and had gone to many of these things, and my mother had been vice president of a committee to help the poor and the blind in Jerusalem. So when I lived in England for 42 years, I also was part of a group to help the eyes of people in Jerusalem because they get a terrible disease from flies going into the eyes of children, which blinds a lot of people. And so I belonged to a committee, and I worked quite hard for it. I used to fly in from Guernsey to London for all the meetings because it's very important. These people are blinded from a fly that just sits in there to get the moisture of the eye. That's why I am interested in Jerusalem from way back.
That answered a little bit of my next question. My next question was, tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, the book is a love story, very unusual, really Romeo and Juliet type book because she is a Saudi Arabian Turkish girl. Her father being from Saudi Arabia, her mother being Turkish. He is an American, and he has been very badly treated all his life. He did save the life of a little child, and because of that, he had some money because he said to the father of the child who was being drowned out in the Atlantic with her nanny, "How much you pay me?" And he said $10,000, and he went out and he's a very good swimmer, and he managed to save them and bring them to the beach, and they were both, well, given respiration and lived because of this boy. But then he was afraid that he was homosexual because he had very bright red hair, and a lot of men tried to seduce him, and he wanted to prove to himself that he wasn't, and he agreed to have sex with a girl who was 14 years old, and they were caught, and he was sent to prison for 20 years. But he was able to get out 3 years ahead of time because the rector of the prison, the man who came and gave the little sermon once a week at the prison, tried to seduce him, and he used that to get out 3 years early. When he gets on a ship, because he has to leave immediately, he has had an extremely interesting experience. He's been taught how to speak better. He's had his teeth fixed. He's learned to be quite a gentlemanly person by joining a group at the Episcopal Cathedral in New York City that takes care of ex-convicts like that. And he has rejuvenated himself, completely redo himself. And unfortunately, he sees an older man during a Halloween procession trying to seduce a little boy, and as he is playing King Neptune, he takes his trident and he puts it in the back of this man to get him off the little boy. And of course, he's got to get out of the country because he didn't kill the man, but he very badly hurt him. He doesn't want to go back to prison. So he gets on a ship that will take him as a waiter, as anything, and he ends up in Turkey on the beach there, and he wants to go swimming. And when he's swimming, he meets this amazing girl who is half Saudi Arabian, half Turkish, but very, very modern in her ways. She certainly will not wear a veil when she's in Saudi Arabia because it's 1948 when things were much more primitive there. And she likes to be with her mother because she has a much more modern life when she gets her 6 months in Turkey. Well, she runs off with him he smuggles her onto the ship where it works, and he gets the captain of the ship to marry them. And then all these experiences happen when they get town after town. When they get to Alexandria, her father has almost had her found and taken back. Then they go to Cairo, and again his people are just about to take her. So they get to Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem she is kidnapped by her father's thugs and taken to Saudi Arabia and put on a little land in the middle of a desert, nowhere near anything. And how he has got to get there and get his wife back is the story of the book. He has got to follow her to that desert. He's got to save her from where she's going to be seduced by the man who gets her out of the desert. And he manages to save his wife, and they get on a ship. And of course, wouldn't you know it, it's the very ship he'd worked on. And he manages to get to London with his wife, and they have a good life. That is the story of my book, Kidnapped.
It sounds very action packed.
Well, it's a great love story because they're not from the same kind of backgrounds. She has been brought up with wealth, and he hasn't been brought up with anything very much. He just grew like Topsy, and yet they love each other so much, and they're very determined to make a life together. And she is pregnant, and she wants that baby, and of course her father wants to get a hold of her and have the baby aborted. He doesn't want any low-life American kid, and she's going to protect that baby by any means she can. And that is the story. They go from city to city to city, trying to get ahead of the very wealthy father with very small means that they have.
So what it sounds like to me is you're saying that your book, Kidnapped in Jerusalem, it's about a couple and their very unfortunate series of events.
Correct.
Wow, that sounds action-packed.
Well, I think so many really good books have something where they're trying to save the Holy Chalice, or they're trying to get to the great city, or there is a purpose to the book, and there is a challenge in the book. And in my book, you certainly have a challenge. Several.
You said there's a purpose to your book. That leads me to my next question. What is the main message you want to get across to your readers?
Go for it. Whatever it is, go for it. If life is challenging, meet the challenge and see how you can best get what you want. If it's a good thing, I'm all for it.
That's very good advice, especially the part where you said if it's a good thing, because sometimes telling somebody to just go for it can end bad.
Oh no, I don't want that at all. I'm very averse to evil, believe me. I know I'm getting myself into trouble, but I don't want evil around. I can almost smell it. I hate evil.
Yeah, evil is an easy thing to hate. Is your book a standalone, or is it a part of a series?
No, this is a standalone book. And that for me is unusual, because I did write a series of 10 detective stories about Rick Harrow, a racehorse trainer. And it's interesting because races are all over the world. You can race in South Africa, you can race in Hong Kong, you can race in France or England, America. And so he goes to all these places in his different books, 10 Rick Harrow books. And some of my readers prefer those to anything because they, of course, have a mystery and they have a challenge and there's a lot to be done. And you go to a strange, unusual country, too.
How old were you when you wrote your first book or your first story?
Oh my, I guess 17. I wrote a book called Flight to the Simple Life, where I found I married the son of the president of a country, and it wasn't simple at all. I went to the country and it was very complicated. So I didn't live the life that I wrote my book about. I should have read it instead of written it.
What does literary success look like to you?
have somebody call me up and tell me they read my book and they loved it? Or could I explain something in the book? Or something that meant a lot to them? That means so much to me. And I've had it happen twice this week. 2 different men call me up who loved the books I've written and wanted me to expand on what they had loved that maybe they had missed, or that they could read another book of mine. So I've written 26 books. None of them Rick Harrow mysteries, remember?
That is a lot of books. 26. That's a lot. What is your biggest source of inspiration? Not just for this book, but for all of your writing. What is your biggest source of inspiration?
Animals. I love animals. I'm very keen on horses, and many, many, many of my books have race horses on the cover, because I do write about what happens at a race course. And of course, I actually knew Dick Francis, who was the greatest writer about what race courses were. He'd been a jockey, and he had the bad luck of being in a race on the Queen Mother's horse, and the Queen Mother's horse was spooked by the enormous excitement being generated in the stands that the Queen Mother's horse was winning, and he stopped. And people thought he'd been bought and that he'd stopped. And of course, Queen Mother's horse lost, and that destroyed his life as a jockey instantaneously. Everybody really gave him the cold shoulder, and he started to write. And here's this low-class little jockey, and he wrote these wonderful racehorse books. Dick Francis, take a look. If you like anything to do with horse racing, read his books. They're wonderful. And I learned a lot from reading them. And I met him. And once I was at a meeting of a club I belonged to called the Society of the Four Horse, and he'd been the speaker. And I went up and I kissed him on the cheek, of course. And everybody said, how could you kiss a jockey on the cheek? Of course, when I was a racehorse owner, I wouldn't have done that in a million years. But he'd become quite a well-known writer by that time. So that was all right, I thought.
This is a little bit of a personal story, but my dad always makes fun of me because I'm small enough to be a jockey.
Oh!
I get a kick out of it. I think it's funny.
Well, I have great respect for jockeys. They put their lives, really every time they go in a race. So many of them have died. And I am down to
I've heard horror stories.
Well, I went, because I had a horse running, my own horse, at Brighton in England. And on the way down, I happened to be in the same train passenger thing as the parents of a jockey. And they were so excited. This was his first ride, and they were going to see him in the new career and blah, blah, blah. And of course, he gets killed in the race. And nowadays, they don't have those heavy posts they had at that time. This was about the 1970s, I guess. And now they have posts that are crumbable. If you hit them, not only do you go down, but the post goes down. But it didn't happen.
That's all kinds of dangerous.
Yep. I'll never forget that day, and I'll never forget the boy. I'm glad that we're giving him a bit of life right now by speaking about him.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
What was the hardest part of writing this book?
Well, I really wanted to write a book that gave something a bit of leg up or a crutch or whatever you want in their religious life. But I know people aren't going to pick up a book too quickly in a library or in a bookstore that is in the religious section, And I don't think this is a religious book necessarily. But that was my purpose, was to bring somebody else who wants to get to God and has had difficulty on the journey to find God, any God. I'm all for the Muslims, I'm all for the Jews, I'm all for anybody who takes you as a great, great maker of all this. I was friends for 5 years, very close friends, and I mean that in the most correct sense, of one of the 6 men who actually walked on the moon. And we were very close friends, and he had 3 meals with me. Every week he would have 3 meals with me because I belonged to 3 clubs, and I'd take him to 1 club at a time each week. He liked that very much. And he had a religious experience. He was an agnostic when he went up. And this is in his book. You can read it in any library. Wonderful book about his journey to the moon and back. And he actually found God coming back. He had not believed in it, but he looked out at all the wonder and the beauty of it. He says, you can't believe how beautiful it is up there. The colors of the different planets and everything, it's extremely beautiful. And of course, the light is different from what we have. There's no thickening in the light. So it's extremely, extremely gorgeous. And he said somehow or other he knew there was a greater being than we are who had created this. This could not have come into being on its own. That's what he thought after going to the moon and coming back in space. And that's a true story. Yep.
I'm agnostic, which means that I don't believe in one specific religion, but I'm open to learn about all.
Great.
I can understand how he would come to that conclusion, because putting myself in those shoes, just thinking about that's crazy. If I had gone to the moon, I think I would have come to the same conclusion. There's no way this just happened. Somebody made this somewhere.
Edgar Mitchell was his name, and he was one of the few people who ever got to the moon and walked on the surface and came back and wrote a very good book about it, which you can get in your library. Extremely interesting man, very convoluted, had very difficult personal life. And I knew him as a friend, that's all. But I knew him very well for 5 years. And he enjoyed going to my clubs and eating dinner. He loved food. I don't know what they gave him to eat going to the moon, but it wasn't.
You know what they say. I mean, you know what they say. The quickest way to someone's heart is through their stomach.
Well, I hope he liked me, because he certainly took a lot of meals off of me, and I didn't cook them. He only went to clubs with me. My cooking would have ended the friendship right then and there.
I know from experience that the quickest way to someone's heart is through their stomach. Make a real good plate of food and you've got anybody happy.
Well, I have a very good cook, a Guatemalan lady who's been with me 17 years, and she is wonderful. And I don't think I'd probably still be married after 5 years to my lovely husband if I didn't have that wonderful cook and he'd had to eat my food. But having said that, when he was courting me, one of the things he said was, and I can cook. No man I'd ever known before said he could cook.
Wow. That kind of, I mean, not necessarily, but that kind of brings me to my next question. What was the highlight of writing this book? What was your favorite part about writing this book?
Well, I have a favorite part, and that's when they meet on the beach in Turkey. He's just a lowly, not a sailor, he's a waiter on the ship, and he has nothing to offer, and yet he is attractive as a man. I told you he has very bright red hair, and she has red hair, which is unusual in a girl from Turkey and Saudi Arabia, very unusual. And they just feel they're made for each other, and you can be sure their baby certainly had red hair. And my favorite writing that I've ever done was in a book I wrote called Kennedys in Love. And I describe a young man who's half Hungarian, half American, and he meets Kit Kennedy, one of the sisters of the president. He's not president yet, he's a senator at the time. And his feelings, and how he wished he could kiss where she'd walked, and where he picks up a book that she'd been reading, and he smells her scent from the pages, because she wears Chanel No. 5. And he loves her so much. The love this man feels. I've only written that well in my life, I think. I don't know how I did it, because I'm certainly not a man, I'm a lady. I've been married several times, and I certainly loved each of my husbands. Maybe my reverend husband least. I was married to a member of the United Church of Christ, and he wasn't a practicing reverend. He was already retired when I met him, married him. But that was a difficult marriage, I will say. Otherwise, I really loved my husband.
I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap this up. Who is your target audience?
Oh, that's a very good question, because I was taught when I went to Columbia University first and then transferred to Barnard College, from which I graduated in New York. Always think about your reader. What do you want to give your reader? God bless you. What do you want the reader to go away with from this? You want the reader to be a better person, don't you, after he's read something or she's read something of yours than before? You certainly don't want them a more evil person. I've just finished a book which I think is very evil because it excites you to have affairs and to do things which are actually against the Ten Commandments. And I thought I couldn't wait to put the book down. I'm a person, if I start a book, I want to finish it. But, I did not like that book at all. I think, let's bring people up. Don't stamp them down. Don't make them worse than they are. Bring out the best in them. Everybody has something good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes it's easy to urge people to do the wrong thing. It's not always easy to urge people to do the right thing.
How wise you are. My goodness. And then I've had in several books, you're supposed to have evil people in your books because you have to have the good and the evil. And I hate doing that because I've had some pretty evil people that I've created in my books, and I don't like it because I don't want anybody to copy them. They're there because you have to have the contrast between your good protagonists, at least I always do, and the evil one. So there is an evil person around, that's for sure. And it was a strange one, kidnapped in Jerusalem because it's her father, and he thinks in a way that he's helping her. But in the book, he does say, "You are my only child, I can never have another, and you are the only person who can give me a dynasty." So he isn't doing it because he wants to be a good father and be somebody uplifting to his child. No, he wants his dynasty to be continued, and that's it. So, you have to find out what people's motives are. Do they have a motive? Sometimes people just sort of go through life in a mess, and that is wrong, because God has given each and every one of us, whichever God you love, the greater being out there has blessed every person, unless the people are ill for some reason, to have the chance to be good and the chance to do good. And if you don't, you've missed out what you were created for, because the Creator is good and we are made in His image. That is what I would like to leave this program, because I do believe that.
That's a wonderful note to leave off on before I ask the two final questions and we wrap this up. Where can readers find out more about you and your books?
Well, I always put my own story on the back of every book. This is the back, and there's my history. And
bring it closer to the camera. It's a little blurry, and yeah, like that.
That's the back. That's the back. That's my biography. Then there's several of my books down here with the photographs of the covers. Not all of them.
I think it's interesting that every single one of your books has a different color scheme and idea to it. I really like that. I think that's very nice.
Thank you. I love my books. They're my babies.
I hope you continue writing. I would love to hear more about your stories. For our final question, how do you feel about working with Authors Press?
Very good. Oh, Authors Press has been very good with me. They published this book, I believe. Isn't it Authors Press? Yes, it's Authors Press. They did a beautiful job. I like the cover very much. And I like that they were always ready to talk to me if I wanted to talk to them. I wasn't put off and told to come back in 3 days or something. I always had an intelligent person. Rena Castillo, I think, is one of the people there, and she's been excellent. She's always ready to talk to me, and we have a back and forth, which is very good. Because I don't want everything. I hate it when people just tell me, oh, you write wonderful books or something. Tell me what they didn't write. Why didn't you develop this character a little more? Or why didn't you make it more definite that the evil is evil and the good is good? You know, I want to hear these things so they don't make that mistake again.
That kind of answers a question I didn't even ask you today, is how you handle literary criticism. It sounds like you need it. You want it. You need it to help better your books, which is good. That's what all authors need. They need criticism, whether it be good or bad, because you have to take into account everything when you're writing. But that's all the questions I have for you today.
The last one was wonderful, because I so agree. You do need criticism, and you do like it, and you don't get all puffed up and angry. You're grateful for it.
I think it's okay to get angry. You know, it's okay, like, you hear something bad about your book, sure, be mad, but respond to that criticism when you're calm. You know, it's okay to feel things. It's how you react when you feel things.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I loved your questions. And I love the way you put them. You're a lovely, gentle person. Your mother should be very proud of you.
Thank you. She is. She's very happy I started working in the publishing industry.
Well, of course, when you're doing what you're doing, it's brilliant and wonderful, and you do it superbly. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for meeting with me today, Beatrice. It was an honor to discuss your book with you. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us through our email or our phone number. But other than that, we can wrap this up. It was such a pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope we can do this again. Have a wonderful day and stay safe, Beatrice.
Goodbye. Thank you.